Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the New Renaissance podcast. This is episode 19. Today, very special guest, Callum. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell everybody what it is that you do, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. First off, thanks for having me on. And for anybody that doesn't know, my name's Callum Abbott. I'm a prep coach, a bodybuilder, trying to juggle both at the minute, which is going all right. And owner of Progress Over Perfection podcast with Ali as well. So we're doing our own little thing when it comes to podcasting, but generally specialise in comp prep, male, female, and trying to give a little bit of a different experience to prep. I think we'll likely dive into these subjects when we get going on the podcast, but I'm a massive believer that prep shouldn't just be about the result that you get. It should be about the personal development that you go through throughout that process of changing your body to a crazy extent. So my mission is to not just to prep people, but also to give people the best prep experience possible.
Yeah, amazing. And do you find that obviously being a bodybuilder yourself, and like you said, having several bodybuilding clients, that not only is there like an improvement in the physique, but a massive improvement in the mindset as well?
100%. And I think from doing it for a long period of time now, it needs to be done in the right way, in a sense of like, I do see it go one way or the other. I either see people improve massively in terms of their mindset, or it can spiral the other way sometimes with obviously things like body dysmorphia or a load of self-doubt. And I do see it go both ways. And that's where I think sometimes having someone that can guide you to keep you aligned with the reasons that you're doing it and making sure you're prepping for the right reasons, all things like that, so important for just keeping your mental in check as you're going through these extreme processes, because as you know, they are extreme.
Yeah, and this is something I've spoken about to people on the podcast before in the past who've like competed and dieted down for photo shoots, etc. Like when you first initially say you want to do a bodybuilding competition, or you first put your name down to do a photo shoot, or diet down to get really low levels body fat, you have to obviously accept that it's going to be really difficult, or else everybody will be walking around that lean all the time. Do you get a lot of people who have that unrealistic expectation before they start?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I think, again, that's when having the right person to just present the prep to you in a way where you know, like, okay, this is what you may have to do. So something I always do with clients is to say, we're not going to use as much cardio as we have to. Like, we're going to try and keep it as low as we can, but you need to be willing to do as much as you need to, in the sense of like, you need to be open-minded to just do whatever it takes, because it's not a process which is cookie cut. Like, you know, everyone responds to it so differently, and some people have to push more than others, other people don't, and that's just the reality of doing it. So knowing that you may have to go like to a certain place and do a certain amount is something that I always try and set from the get-go when it comes to doing a prep.
Yeah, 100%. And what would you say is like one of the main improvements you'd see in someone's mindset over time, like being a competitor, going through the dieting stages, then the gaining phases of like eating not many calories and then eating high amounts of calories?
Yeah, really good question. Honestly, I think it's self-belief.
Yeah.
Like, I think when you go through a process like that, and as extreme as it sounds, you are depriving yourself of something which you naturally want to do. Like, the level of resilience that you build in that kind of gives you the confidence that, right, if I can physically deprive myself from something I want to do every day, every hour, I can do whatever I put my mind to.
Yeah, that's so good. And mate, I've witnessed that firsthand with clients myself, and obviously when I've dieted myself, and I think that's so true. You do, and it's like when you push yourself to do hard things and you suffer, you then develop that self confidence. So let's say the next big thing comes up, you're like, right, I've suffered that hard doing this. I can easily take on this next task, and that can obviously apply not only just to you dieting for a bodybuilding competition, but it can reflect over into other areas of your life as well.
100%. And again, I think once you've built that initial confidence through that, like, you can literally do anything, because you've proven to yourself. This is because the thing is, I think with bodybuilding especially, is you can never switch off from it. Like, there's always food, there's always meals you've got to eat, there's always training sessions you've got to do. So when you're so deep into a process like prep, you can't escape it, in the sense of when you're in it, you're in it. And being able to, like you say, I don't like the word suffer. I'm gonna put that out there first of all, but I know what you mean when you say that. Like, when you are literally suffering day to day and you can endure that and do it positively, then you are going to be in a position to literally do whatever you want.
Yeah, and mate, I like the way that you've reframed the word suffer, because that's literally the next thing that I was going to touch on, and that's something that I've took from yourself, and what I think I've seen it on one of your Instagram reels. I think it's such a good way to think about things, especially when, say, you've got clients who are dieting to levels where they're going really low body fat, and then you've got clients who are eating high amounts of food and get to a point where they don't want to eat any more food. how do you go about reframing someone's mindset? This is a term that I've heard you mention before, and for me, it's like having the ability to allow yourself to see failure as an opportunity to grow. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I love you brought this one up because I think it's something that's so easy for us all to do, but we don't understand how to do it or the power of it. And I think you're probably quite big on this as well, knowing you, is like the power of that words have, like the connotations that are attached to words. Like I always think about it in a really simplistic way. Like when we see the color red, we often think like blood or just something that's kind of of a negative connotation, you know? So I think when we look at words and we really break down the meaning of words, we think, right, suffering's painful, it's hard, it's something that we don't want to do. Whereas we know suffering in a diet only means less body fat. So when you look at it like that, it's like, okay, the word may be negative, but the outcome from the word is positive. So it's always trying to just reframe the words that you use to things, knowing that how you use them can dictate how you feel whilst you're doing it. So just to break down another example there, like cardio, yeah, it may be boring or it may be time consuming, but the result that comes from cardio is nothing but positive. You're either healthier because you're fitter or you've got less body fat. Like there's no negative that come from doing cardio other than the only one I can think of is time consuming. But because if you're going into it with that mindset of cardio's boring, it's hard, it's going to be long, like you're already supposing how you're going to feel before you actually done it.
Yeah, it's almost like you said, instead of having the mindset of I'm suffering doing this cardio, it's literally telling yourself I am losing body fat doing this cardio. That's the whole reason why I initially said that I was going to do this cardio.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's something that you can do and just correct yourself on. Like I notice myself doing it sometimes with silly things. Like if I wake up one day and let's say maybe have an hour less sleep, I'll be like, I'm tired today. But am I actually tired or am I just saying that to then make myself feel better, you know? Like just trying to really analyze the words that you use before you do things and just pull yourself up on it a little bit and be like, no, let's say it like this, let's do it like this. And you'll find that 9 times out of 10, when you can keep yourself in check like that, everything feels easier.
Yeah, and that, mate, that's a really extreme positive like way of self-talk. I think I listened to a podcast once with Jocko Willink, and he says that he woke up one morning and there was someone telling him that you need to do your training in the evening. There's no point doing it in the morning. It's literally just a waste of time. It's going to make you feel worse. And then he says at the end, he's like, and that was my voice in my head. He said, that was me telling myself when I woke up, don't do your cardio in the morning. You might as well do it in the evening. Have an extra hour in bed. So sometimes having that self-talk of being able to reframe your own mindset is so powerful because it allows you to get up and do things when you should do, or go and do that cardio where most people might just think, oh no, I don't feel like it today. I'm just going to leave it. And then once they've left the gym, that's it.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I think one of the reasons this is, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this as well to kind of come back on it, is I feel like we're all so easily influenced by what we see and hear now on social media, in the sense of like, we see a post that says, I don't know, water's got calories in, and instantly we start thinking, is that true? Like, is that right? Like, we don't even know the beliefs that we hold because we're so easily bought into reading and watching other things. And I think sometimes really sitting back and analysing, okay, why do I feel this way about a certain thing, or why do I think this way about a certain task, is really useful to be like, okay, why do I actually think that? Like, who's influenced me to think that way? Do I actually feel like that, or is that something I've been forced to think that way?
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with you, mate, because I think a lot of people don't have that self-reflection because there's so much on social media that's obviously short form content that people have probably heard before of. Everyone's sort of attention span's getting lower and lower, probably lower than like a goldfish, I think someone said once. And you
Yeah.
then don't have the chance to even reflect on like, why am I actually believing this information that I'm taking in? Like a lot of people need to actually sit with themselves and understand what it is they actually want. Like, why do they actually want those things? Like we spoke about at the start, if you're actually wanting to get on stage or do a photo shoot or launch a business or start running, why do I actually want to do those things? Is it because I've seen somebody who I look up to who's got a nice physique, or somebody who's ran under sub-hour marathon, or 10K probably is more realistic, and they've got loads of sponsorships? Am I doing it because I want to do it, or is it because they've done it? And that's something that I've spoke about with someone in this podcast as well, and I think it was a term called mimetic desire. It's realizing that you don't want something because somebody else wants it, and being completely true to the goals that you've set yourself.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think if we link that back into prep, like if you just follow any of the top bodybuilders or the top influencers, you're going to see phrases like the trenches, or like you said, suffering in prep. And I think the way I always like to think about it is if you said to anyone, well, how would you like to ideally look? 9 times out of 10, it's how they would want to look in prep, like shredded to the bone, like the muscles are popping, they look sick. And why's that got to be something which is associated with being in the trenches. Like that's a privilege to go and do that. Like I always look at it in the way like I used to think to myself when I was younger, like if I could look like someone out of a comic book or an action movie, like that'd be the coolest thing in the world. And every single person has the opportunity to do that to some degree. Like obviously there's levels to it, but to get yourself to a certain level of body fat and show the muscle that you can, that you've worked for, is like it's almost a dream. And how that's phrased as something which is so hard and such a struggle and such a negative process is it baffles me sometimes.
Yeah, there's a saying that I always used to speak about was if you want to find happiness, find gratitude. And I feel like with what you're saying there, with wanting to get into that condition where you look really lean, and like you said, people relating that to be being in the trenches or having to do ridiculous amount of cardio or dieting for such a long period of time. If you can, again, like you mentioned, reframe your mindset, but in a way that you're grateful for the position that you're in, because like you said, you look so much better compared to like 90% of the average population, and actually just be proud of the current position that you're in instead of getting to the end of that diet and then putting the weight back on and then thinking, oh, I didn't even have fun when I was that lean.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And we've all got that in a weird way, haven't we? Like when we're dieting, we think, oh, I wish I was growing, or when we were growing, we think, I wish I was dieting. We've all got that kind of opposite mindset towards the phases that we do. But that's another point I think is just being so present in the position you're in and being like, I look in the best shape of my life right now. And I even actually had it with a girl this morning, funny enough to mention it, like she's on this weight loss journey with me and she checked in at her lowest weight today, but she only lost at something like zero point 0.2 pounds. And I was like, yeah, but you're still the lowest weight you've been. Like if you'd have said to me 3 months ago that you was at this position, you that would blow your mind. So sometimes it's being able to just be in that moment and be like, I'm actually doing the thing, or I am the person that I wanted to be X months ago or X years ago.
Yeah, it's so crazy because again, I've had this with clients myself as well. Like you just mentioned, where say they've lost a really big, like large chunk of weight, where it's like they've gone from X weight to 30 pounds lighter or 40 pounds lighter, 50 pounds lighter, even sometimes. And then when they're not losing weight and they're 50 pounds lighter, sometimes they get so frustrated with themselves they can't even see all this massive hard work that they put in to get themselves to where they are. And it's like, oh my God, if you could have seen yourself 6 months ago and told yourself you was going to look like this, then they would have not even believed you. So kind of again, like you just mentioned, having that appreciation for like being present and where you currently are and being like, do you know what? I'm in the best possible position I'm in. I just need to keep on doing what I'm doing because it's worked already. And sometimes when people get that mindset and they start thinking a little bit more positive, the weight seems to come off as well.
100% agree. And that's where I feel like the dynamic of coaching needs to shift slightly, and that it's not just chasing numbers, or it's not just let's keep digging. It's like, okay, we've come this far, let's stop and appreciate it. Let's be present in the moment that we're in, then set the new goal and strive for more. Like, let's really kind of get a positive mindset around the process, because once you do that, everything feels easier, and you also become, like you say, more present and grateful in the process of achieving your goals.
Yeah, do you find that that gratitude is a massive factor for, say, the competitor or, say, for yourself when you've competed, where people need that because then they don't want to come out of the diet or step off stage feeling like they've not enjoyed the time where they've dieted?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it varies, to be honest, with like seasoned competitors and first timers. Like obviously, the way that I'll frame a first timer prep is very different to the way that I'll frame a seasoned competitor prep, because they may be going for like improving on placings or going for a specific result. So it's slightly different depending on who the client is. But generally, yeah, I'd agree with you that it is very much framed around like being present, enjoying the process, because that's all we've got at the end of the day. And I know we talk about this so often in bodybuilding that we can't control the result. We can just control the actions that we do. And I think the way that you can go through such a what's the right word? Just an all-consuming sport is to enjoy yourself doing it, because the result is 1% of the process, isn't it? Like the process is what you're living daily and the actions you're doing. And if you can enjoy that, then you make the journey so much easier.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even as simple as saying like when you're dieting and you're on low amounts of calories, and then when you get into an off-season gaining phase, like I can imagine, like what's the highest calories that you've ever been up to in a gaining phase?
Got to be plus the fives. Definitely plus five.
And then obviously you having that reflection where it's like, oh my God, I'm eating this much amount of food now when I was eating next to nothing when I was dieting. Like, I wish I was back dieting now. Were you having that sort of reflection in off-season and in dieting?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. And again, it's one of those ones, isn't it? Like I feel we're so I don't want to say unappreciative, as that's probably the wrong word, but that you hit the nail on the head. Like when we're dieting, we're thinking nothing about eating more food, and when we're eating more food, we're thinking nothing about dieting. So we've constantly got this complex of thinking about what we can't have, and sometimes it's then just stopping and being like, right, I'm doing this right now. I'm grateful for everything that's coming from this process and what I'm doing, rather than focusing on the one thing we don't have. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And mate, I think it's so good because it's easy to break it down, like the idea of not being present, say for a bodybuilder, because it's literally less food, hungry, more food, too full. But you can reflect that onto the person who's listening who maybe not being a bodybuilder, who's sat in the pub with their mates and thinking, I want to be on holiday. I can't be bothered with England. I want to be on holiday. Then they get on holiday and they're there for 3 days and they think, oh, I'm sick of this. I want to be home. I'm bored. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? The whole thing, it reflects onto so many different areas. Or the person who's in the 9 to 5 job and they get in on Monday morning, they think, can't be bothered with work today. And then they get paid on Friday and they're like, yeah, do you know what? I'm not too fussed about my job.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, because I love bodybuilding. Obviously, the prep that people go through and the way that they look on stage, I think the whole process is amazing because I think there's so many different parts of it that are applicable to everyday life as well. And some people just see it as, oh, they're just getting dead lean and they're standing on stage. But there's so much you can take from a mindset perspective, which I don't know. It's just something, obviously, being around bodybuilders and coaching and stuff that I've always picked up on. Like the whole, like when you mentioned reframing your mindset, I thought that's so true because even, like, say, for instance, we were going to training now, like you've mentioned, if you was to fail on a set and say the lad who's just trying to build muscle may be disheartened that, oh, I'm not getting stronger. Like some of the lads next to me are benching 120, 130 kilos and I might have just failed on 100. But it's like, why don't you just reframe your mindset and be like, you may have not even been able to get 80 a couple of weeks ago. You failed 100, which is the green light saying you're going in the right direction to improve.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I know it's really deep, and this is something that you'll probably hear me and Ali talk about all the time because we always go into stuff like this. But there was times where, like, we're driving to the gym and we'll see someone that's, like, let's say, walking down the road, carrying a walking stick, or someone that's walking, or someone's pushing someone in a wheelchair. Sorry, and you think them people like that would probably kill to be in a position where they could just go to the gym, like not even to worry
Yeah.
about bodybuilding or progression, just to do some form of activity. And there's us sitting there thinking, oh, should we progress this today, or this session may be a little bit hard? Like there's such a deeper meaning to everything we do, and I think sometimes when you can step out of the position that you're in and look at it from like an overview perspective, it just puts everything in context.
Yeah, 100%. And even just speaking about that, like having the appreciation for the current position that you're in, but also the gratitude and respect that you're not going to be ignorant and realize that when you do get older, you need to make sure that you're in the best possible health and physique that you can be now. So when you get to those later years, you can still be active, you can still do as much as you can do. I think a lot of people can take the position that they're in now for granted, and then years tick by, and next thing you know, you're older, and it's like, I wish I would have just stuck to the plan from day one.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a hard lesson that we have to go through in life, is that we only learn things the hard way, in the sense of it's always a little bit too late before we're like, shit, I should have done that, or I should have done this. And that's why sometimes I think being around and looking at the world from a set of eyes which isn't your own is so useful. Like, instead of always thinking, oh, I feel like this, or I've got to do this today, or I've got this day in front of me, just sit back and actually look at everything from an outside perspective and look at where you're at and the time that how old you are, the time that you've got left. And I know it's really deep to go into, but I find it's a really powerful thing for me anyway, to sometimes do the things I need to do and not get too caught up in how I feel or the tiredness or this and that, because them emotions come and go. It's more so, what can you do today which is going to make a difference to your later years or people around you.
Yeah, 100%. And if you've got that goal set and you know you're working towards something, say as a coach and a bodybuilder, having those emotions, like you said, you know that they're going to come in all the time at different times. One day you might feel motivated, one day you might feel a little bit sad, depressed, whatever. But you know that if you just keep on knocking the door down on the tasks that you've set yourself, you'll still get to that end goal regardless.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I feel like we've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. So I don't know if you want to pull back on a question, because I know I've kind of spilled off on a few things there.
No, mate, it's good. I think one of the things you just mentioned that I will speak about is people who don't fix things until they're broken. Now, that's a saying that I don't like, and I've tried to mention this to clients. Don't wait until things are broken to fix things. I think a lot of people can assume that if everything's not going wrong, then it's all okay. But that's usually not the case. You can't wait until you get a health scare or you're diagnosed with some sort of health condition to then be like, right, I need to get in shape. I need to sort my health out. You can't just keep piling on weight and then go, oh, I've got type 2 diabetes. You need
Yeah.
to take a step back, look at the position you're currently in, be educated and think, I don't want to end up in this position. So what's the best possible place I can put myself to make sure I'm heading in the right direction? And it's so true what you just said.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm going to ask you a question off the back of this. Like, what do you think's been the biggest switch, biggest change for you mentally? Because I've seen you go from obviously when you first joined Nathan to where you are now and everything you've done in terms of achievement. So what would you say's put you in a position to want to learn and want to have a mindset of improvement?
So initially, mate, when I first joined up with Nathan, like the one of the main things was always just to want to like learn more, be better, etc., etc. I think around the time when I stopped playing football, I had a crazy injury with my hip, and I remember just going out like all the time, first year of university, like drugs, gambling, whatever, for about a year, 2 years, and one day I was just like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I think because some of the people who were potentially around me, family members who I know had gone down that path in the past, and I kind of looked at them and looked at their lives in, let's say, 30 years longer doing the things that I was doing. And then that's when I had that realization of like, not fixing things when they're broken. I was broken at that point. I was like, right, I need to fix things and I need to get myself on a path where I'm going as far away from that path as what those people were going on. So as soon as I
Yeah.
just started doing that, I just enjoyed it. The whole like self-improvement, the whole trying to get better every single day. And then obviously becoming a coach, it was like, I want to help other people do this as well. And kind of having that mindset of when I was this person who was the person I don't want to be, I want to push myself as far away from that person as possible now.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's interesting to hear because I think it does take all of us that one moment of realization when we're like, okay, something needs to change. And I feel like it's at that moment you
Yeah.
can either set the bar high and come away from that position, like you said, or you just kind of keep succumbing to it and feel unhappy in the position that you're in.
Yeah, there's the saying of like there's two forms of suffering. There's the suffering of obviously being disciplined now, putting the work in, doing the hard things, waking up when these emotions are coming in that you don't want to do the thing that you're doing, but you carry on doing it. So then in X amount of time, you get to the end and you don't have to suffer, or you suffer now where you don't suffer now where you do whatever you want. You have those instant gratification moments of gambling, drinking, whatever, and then 30, 40 years down the line, that's when you start to suffer. So there's two ways you can obviously go about it in your life. You either do the work now, don't suffer later, or you suffer now and then you have to do the work later.
Yeah, completely agree.
What about you, mate? What was the first initial thing that made you think, right, I want to compete and I want to start being a coach?
Yeah, really good question. And I think it ties back to the first point you said was like, what do I feel like the biggest lesson someone can take from like a prep or bodybuilding is? And I'd love to hear the actual science behind this because I actually believe in this, but I can't quite explain it. But I do feel like your psychology to some degree changes when you diet. Like I feel like you become so open to suggestion with growing, and you just feel like clear with your mind. I feel like for some reason when you're dieting and you haven't got these clouded thoughts from like bad food or just being unproductive with your day, you almost feel like you gain so much more time, and your thought process is so open to suggestion with how can I get better, or you start analyzing this about yourself. And I think this links in quite well with bodybuilding in that we become so analytical over like, did I get this sleep, did I get this perfect amount of nutrition in that day? And when you start having that mindset where you're trying to home in and make all the variables perfect, I feel like you then start doing that about life, and then you're like, okay, how can I expand my knowledge to be the most knowledgeable person possible? Like, how can I, what business venture can I start which I'll enjoy? And I feel like you just become so open to suggestion with things that it all stems from that bodybuilding process of wanting to be better and looking for all the areas that you can improve.
Yeah, 100%. And I've found that with clients myself. I can ask you the same question. Do you feel like you found it with your clients where, say, they start dieting and they start losing the weight and they have the exact same experience as you've mentioned, where like work becomes better, relationships become better, and the lifestyle where they want to actually do things that potentially they didn't do in the past, they start doing, like whether it's
Yeah.
going on a big walk on the weekend, going seeing a new place, or doing something in the week that may be launching some form of new business or picking up new habits that are obviously going to benefit them better, like reading, etc. Do you find that a lot with people dieting as well?
100%. And it's really funny you said because I can see the switch. Like I can see it when someone's in that place, and it's so rewarding because you know at that point that client's in a position where they can literally turn their life around. And you only need to then start employing more habits and things that are going to make them improve better, that you can see the switch instantly. And it's such a cool thing to watch unfold. I know I'm sure you get it with your clients as well.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a book that I read and I'm a massive on, mate, by Ryan Holiday. It's called Discipline is Destiny, and he kind of speaks about how the Stoics and like the whole purpose of life is obviously to be the best possible version of yourself. And I feel like when you go into that dieting phase and you start realizing that you are becoming a better person, then you start realizing what your actual purpose is as a human, and you're like, why have I never done this in the past? Why have I never actually tried to put myself first and look the best that I can do? Because a lot of people don't get taught that in school. They don't realize how good you feel when you do it. So then you start obviously venturing off into these new things of like, right, I want to start a business, I want to start doing this, I want to start trying to be the best possible person that I can be.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I feel like in a weird way, when you diet to like extreme levels, it puts a filter on your brain. Like you kind of haven't got time for any bullshit, as weird as that sounds. You kind of filter out the people that you don't want in your life, the people that you do, the things you don't want to do, the things you do, because your priorities shift and change. Where when you're in that place where you're dieting, you need to get a certain amount of things done and you need to prioritize certain tasks. And I feel like your filter just switches and it just produces such a positive environment for new habits and new growth.
Yeah, and it's so good because you almost become like the boss of your own job. Like your job is obviously to diet. You have to set the calendar. That's the other thing
Yes.
as well. When you actually start dieting, it's obviously having a coach makes it a lot easier, but you still have to do a lot of the work and you're holding yourself accountable then. And that's a trait that you can take on into a job promotion that you might be trying to do, because your calendar then has to be regimented. It has to be steps, cardio, meal, training, etc., etc. And if you can start to develop the habits of obviously making sure that you are holding yourself accountable for absolutely everything, that will play you tenfold in whatever you actually try and do in the future.
Yeah, and I also think from like a coach and client perspective, there's a level of buy-in that when you can see a client that when they come to you, you know exactly what they can achieve based on where they're at. Like we know without when you remove their limitations and their level of self-belief, we're like, okay, this is where you're at. I know what you can achieve if you follow X, Y, Z. And then when that plan starts to unfold and then you can see their belief in the process and the plan come into life as well, it's really exciting because you can then start setting the bar higher and then introduce a new task that they couldn't then do at the start because you needed to tick off this one box first of all. And it's just such a cool process to watch unfold.
Yeah, and we'll bring it right back to the reframing your mindset, mate. When you first started out as, say, a bodybuilder and a coach, did you find that you had to reframe your mindset in a way of, I'm not at X level yet where I've got this amount of clients, or I'm not 1X competition? What was that initial feeling of like first going into coaching and bodybuilding?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit then. Could you repeat that?
Sorry, mate. So what was the first experience for yourself, or what did it feel like when you first went into coaching and bodybuilding? How did you find that?
I'd say it's a mix. It's a real mix of emotions because I feel like you've got that initial feeling of imposter syndrome of like, oh shit, I'm actually helping people, which in our cases, people that are older than us, which I can imagine's
Yeah.
or it is a feeling that you kind of like you feel a little bit unqualified to do because sometimes we're coaching people that have got kids, families, and running these businesses, and we're like, hold on, they're coming to us for advice. So sometimes you've got that real imposter syndrome aspect, but then like I said earlier with the belief with the client, you also get them belief as a coach when the results start coming in and the progress starts coming, the messages come in where they feel like their life's changed, and that then builds your confidence as a coach to be like, I'm pretty good at what I do, and then that then stems from there, and you help more people, and that confidence grows, and it just flourishes from there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And would that be the same with when you competed as well? Like for the first time, was it like all out of enjoyment, or was it like, right, I want to try and achieve X goal, but I know it's going to take time to get there? And then when you first stepped on stage, it was like, right, I need to go through this process to then get up to the next level. Was it that, again, reframing your mindset on like when you first started, having that lower expectation than what most people potentially do when they go into being a competitor?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's slightly different for me because bodybuilding was something, or sorry, competing was something I wanted to do from such a young age. Like even just to step on stage was a dream to me. So I was able to create my prep in that positive space just because I felt like I was living a dream, as cliche as that sounds. Like I remember watching people on YouTube with their prep series for probably like 4 or 5 years before I'd done mine. So then when my time come around, it was like, right, let's embrace and enjoy every moment of this. Like I've waited for this moment for so long, and just being able to live that experience was something which I genuinely did take in every day and was like, it is happening now. So I know how quick it's going to go. From building the business, I know how quickly time goes and you achieve things that you want to achieve. So I was like, let's be present every day. And anytime I noticed myself be anything slightly selfish with saying, oh, I have to do this today. I was like, snap, I get to do this today. This is something you've wanted to do. Like, and I feel like that was a big turning moment for me in the reframing, was noticing how quickly you could revert to negative thinking patterns, if that makes sense. In that I knew that was a process I wanted to do, but I was noticing myself get pulled away from it in the sense I was like, oh, I've got to go do this today. And I'm like, why am I thinking like this? This is something I want to do. I've committed to this. And that's probably the biggest moment for me where it's clicked. And I was like, the power of the reframing is so important.
And is that something that just came on by itself, or is that something that you feel like you've learned? Was there any sort of processes that you took where you potentially journaled, or anything that you'd read, or was that just something that came over time where it was like, do you know what, I just want to have a positive outlook on all these things that I'm doing? Whereas most people, and I'd say even 9 times out of 10 I do myself, where I will get up and if I've got to do cardio, I'll have to constantly battle on myself to go and do it. Where was that like light switch moment where it was like, do you know what, I'm just going to find the absolute most positive out of this situation?
Yeah, so it came from that. It came from knowing that it was a process I wanted to do, but finding myself questioning the actions with how much I wanted to do them. And I was kind of a little bit like, why is this going on? Like, I know I want to do this. Why is my brain fighting against me? And it was at then point I started then just reframing myself and just training my brain to think a different way. And then that's when I was also introduced to NLP. I'm not sure if you've heard of NLP.
No, I've heard about it a lot, but I've never actually picked up on it.
Yeah, so it's called neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically like it's a program of modeling like successful mindsets. And when I then fell into this and learning about that, there was a whole section on reframing and like connotations to words, etc. And it kind of just backed up what I was already doing and explained it to me. And I think people like ourselves, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when we understand why we're doing something, we're more inclined to do it. So I was actually able to then read in and be like, okay, this makes sense. Like I can actually do this way now to make it more successful. And it was a thought process that I initially was doing anyway, and then learned how to do it more successfully.
Yeah, 100%, mate. After we've wrapped up this podcast, or if you could potentially let people know, like who are listening now, where would be the best place to find out about that NLP?
Yeah, so there's a few books that are on Amazon. I don't know if there's any links or anything we can put on this, but there's a couple of books that are really good, like initial reads, and they kind of just introduce you to it and explain what it is. And then there's also courses that you can buy online as well, which kind of break it down. They're cheap and they're in nice segments, and it's a real easy but successful program to follow because it's so simple. And as I say, it teaches you things that you do every day which you don't even realize you do.
Yeah,
It
and I
kind
think
of
it's so true
explains
what you
concepts
mentioned.
as well.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, if you can then understand those concepts and you can understand the knowledge behind something, you're more inclined to actually do it.
Yeah, 100%. It's like we was talking about earlier with analysing the beliefs we hold and the reasons that we think the way we do. Sometimes it's easy to just think and act and not know why. Whereas sometimes you sit back and you think, okay, why do I actually think like this? Or why am I saying things like this? Or why am I talking to myself this way? And then when you understand it, you're like, I'm not doing it for any genuine reason. It's just something that I'm doing as a natural process. And when you understand it, that's when you can correct it and make it more suited to you and your life.
Yeah, mate. So many people who are listening to this should really, really listen to what you've just said there. There's a book that I read called The Chimp Paradox, and it literally speaks about having a conversation with yourself mentally as if you're talking to a friend. And he said, even as simple as saying people who have a lot of negative self-talk, who are potentially feeling anxious or depressed, if you was to be saying the things that you're saying to yourself to somebody else all the time, that person would more than likely not want to be friends with you because you're being
Yeah.
constantly negative, you're constantly putting on these anxious thoughts to them, and that's what you're doing to yourself mentally. You are having these constant conversations with yourself, and if you can do exactly what you've said and notice that and pick up on it like throughout the day, and we're not saying like when you're in the middle of a meeting just say, hold on a minute, pal, I'm just like talking to myself, but like out at the back of it or before it, be like, right, I've felt this way before, I'm just going to remind myself, do you know what, before you do this cardio or before you go into this meeting, you felt this way in the past, but try and reframe it and be like, I've never been in this position before, I should be grateful that I'm in this position. And that then gives you the confidence, like we've spoken about, to go and do those things without feeling the worry that they might go wrong.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think a real simplistic way that I like to break it down to people is like, when we go in the gym, all we do is lift one more rep or a little bit more weight than we did before. That then causes an adaptation, and you can go and you can do more next time, and you're stronger and you're better off the back of it. And I always think with your mindset, it's like all your thoughts the more positive thoughts you can start building on, the more that's then going to grow, the more that's then going to build, the more you're going to strengthen that side of your brain to think and act that way. So I find that everything's very linked to the gym for me, in the sense of the progression aspect of the training is then the progression aspect of your mindset. And when you can link the two and start realizing that, okay, every positive thought is a extra rep, or it's an extra bit of progression for my mindset, then it's a real easy concept to try and deploy and start using with your own mind.
Yeah, 100%. And it's almost like the negative thoughts are like the reps where you fail in the gym, and it's like, where did that rep go wrong? How can I improve on it next time?
100%.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Anything is always relatable to training, I find.
Literally.
It actually is, especially when you're in the gym all the time. I think it's such a good tool to be able to reflect back on. Like, I've done it with countless things, mate. Like, if anyone ever speaks about me about something potentially going wrong and they need to fix a weaker area, like I remember when I fractured my hip when I was younger, and I'm always like, yeah, it's very similar to how I had to do single leg RDLs because on my right side of my leg, my glute was underactive, blah 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 blah, and then like, just shut up, mate.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But it's what we know works, and I think that's why
Yeah.
we do it. It's because the confidence that we've got, it comes from the the knowing that if every time you go in the gym you do something a bit different, you're going to get better. And I think that confidence is then like, okay, if I can apply that to this, is that right? And then we try it and then it works. And then all that relatability is just the aspect of showing up 1% better every day, or doing a little bit more here and a little bit more there. And it's a real, foolproof way to just improve any area that you want to.
Yeah, and it's taking on that failure and realizing that failure becomes a failure only if you learn nothing. If you go into a set and you fail and then you just completely beat yourself up and you say to yourself, I'm not strong enough, I'm never going to be big enough, blah, 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 you've accepted defeat. Whereas if you fail that set and then you go, right, what went wrong? Did I warm up correctly? Have I had enough sleep? Have I had the right food? Am I prepared for this session? No, I probably weren't. Right, next time I'm going to actually lift that weight, and accepting that you need to be self-critical to be able to actually succeed. You can't just fail and then be like, oh, do you know what? The universe doesn't like me. I'll never look like X person on stage or X person who can lift more
Yeah.
weight than me. You need to reframe those failures into be something that you learn from.
100%. And you nailed it there. And I think that self-reflection then gives you the tools to do it with everything. Like if you then go in and you smash that lift that you wasn't able to do last week, you think, how did I do that? And you think, oh, I thought about this variable, that variable, that variable. And then you start realizing, okay, if I have the same failure in, let's say, a business sense, or I don't know, something happens in a relationship, if you analyze that and look at all the variables and say, how can I get better and how can I improve? That's only going to lead to a positive spiral of just improvement all round.
Yeah, and again, like you just mentioned, it's these things that we're speaking about in regards to training and bodybuilding. I just think are so like applicable to other areas of your life as well. And like when it comes to you being self-critical, like on yourself, obviously training, you've got the notes pad there with the sets, with the reps, with the weight, which a lot of people don't do. And if you're listening, you definitely should track your training. Just a reminder and a disclaimer. But when it comes to say understanding the way that you think in, let's say, a relationship or business or your own mindset towards bodybuilding, is there any sort of tasks that you use to actually self-analyze yourself, or is that something you just do internally, or is it like journaling, etc.?
Yeah, journaling is a big one. And obviously I learned that from when I first started working with Ali, is he recommended, what was the planner called? I think it was called, I can't remember, that's going to bug me now. But it was a certain planner, and it was kind of a very detailed one of like, okay, what are you grateful for today? What are the wins? What could you have done better? And it was a very like deep thinking journal, and I kind of just adapted that with what I like to analyze and the kind of things I like to track, and then made my own version of that through doing that daily, and that works extremely well.
Yeah, amazing. And mate, what is up next for you? Like, what is the next goal for yourself? Have you set for like business, for competing? What's coming up?
Yeah, good question. So I think for me, my progression now doesn't lie within a certain number of clients or a certain financial gain. Like obviously I've got targets that I want to hit just for progression in general, but from like a fulfillment standpoint, it's just everything that we spoke about today, and making people more aware that this process that you go through doesn't have to be one where you're dragging your heels or it's a negatively framed process. Like my journey now is about trying to inspire as many people to do this process, to have a good time and enjoy it, and almost like, because we spend so much of our lives doing this as bodybuilders, like every meal's calculated, every training session's calculated, like we live and breathe it. So why not do that process and actually enjoy doing it rather than being disconnected from it the full way?
Yeah, mate, I think that's amazing. And just again, having that mentality that you constantly wanting to be the best version of yourself and kind of just wanting to inspire and reflect that onto other people as well.
Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of my mission at the minute, is to just expand that and make more people aware of that side of it. And in terms of personal goals, 2026, we're aiming to compete again, and I think that'll be a good time for me to just showcase this more, because I think it's all well and good me talking about it now after my first prep, because I've done a good job of it then, but I want to walk the walk and show that you can do it when I'm actually prepping as well. So that's kind of the next goal.
Yeah, and what is, and I love asking this question to people who are competitors or people who are athletes in their own respect, like what is the biggest driver for you to continuously want to knock down the door of, say, competing and getting on stage?
Biggest drivers, probably, it's changed over time if I'm completely honest. And I think that the biggest driver initially was just to prove to myself that I could. And it was that whole element of confidence building in saying, right, I've said I'm going to do this. I know how challenging it can be. Can I pull it off? And now that box is ticked. I think the second box for me to tick is, like I just said there, showing that you can full send it all the way, still get a good result, and do it with a positively framed mindset.
Mate, and I love that first one that you mentioned. That's one of the biggest things that I sort of have as my driver when I do things, and it's hard to put into words sometimes. Of like, I just want to see if I can do something. Like, if it's a half marathon, or if it's a high rocks or a marathon or an ultra next year, which I've got booked in. It's like I'm only doing it not for like, oh, I want to do it so I can beat this person's time. Most of the time, it's can I actually run that far? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then once that's ticked, it's like, okay, what's next? And then you build on these accolades and you build on these achievements, and it really does just show you the power of your own mind and body as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can get the frustration of not being happy with the result that they've got because they've gone into it with the driver being, oh, do you know what? I want to do this because I've seen someone do it, and then at the back of it, they've got this reward for it, or they've done it and they've got this time. If your complete goal is, I want to get on stage, or I want to do this competition with the aim of putting myself out of my comfort zone and doing something I've never done before, you'll always have a positive, like a positive end at the back, out the back of that. You'll finish that goal and you'll be like, do you know what? Even if I didn't come first, even if I placed last, or even if I got the slowest time and I was slower than people who I thought I'd be quicker than, I just wanted to see if I could do this, so I'm buzzing with the results, so I know that I can go and book the next thing.
Yeah, and you literally you hit the nail on the head there, because I think, sorry to dive back in, that's so important in the sense of, like, you could be a first timer, go through the process of stepping on stage, which you would never do before, go through the process of getting in this incredible condition, which you've never done before, but because you're just focused on winning or just focused on one thing, you discredit everything else that you've achieved through that prep, because you're only homing in and focused on that one thing that you can't control. Whereas if you focus on everything you can control and the variables that you've overcome and challenged yourself to do and you've done, you're always a winner at the end.
Yeah, amazing. And mate, I like to always wrap up these podcasts with little bits of takeaway, so to not keep too much of your time, but if you could recommend to the person who's listening, like, where's the best place that you've obviously educated yourself as a coach, as a bodybuilder, if you could push it on to anybody else?
Good question. I'd say I'm going to do a different one here. I think the biggest thing someone can learn is analysing themselves and their thoughts. Rather than looking externally for things, whilst there are loads of resources out there, I think spending time analysing, why do I think the way I do? Why am I thinking about this task in a certain way? Is a really easy and simple technique that you can do to just improve the way that you think about tasks, or the way that you concept things in your mind, by just analysing your own thoughts.
Amazing. And would you say that's one of the biggest lessons that you've learned as well as being a coach and a bodybuilder?
100%. Yeah, I think being
Yeah, I
able
love
to take
that.
criticism and being able to self-reflect and be self-accountable is one of the biggest things that anyone can do to just improve the things that they do or the way that they think about things.
Yeah, mega, mate. That's probably one of the biggest lessons you've taught me as well. The reframing your mindset, and I'm definitely going to be having a look at this NLP. I'm going to be looking at that over the next couple of weeks and learning more about
Love
it,
it.
because it's something that every time I see the reels, I think he's hit the nail on the head. This lad, he understands that if you can have a positive outlook on things, not only are you going to be able to motivate yourself to do it, but you're also going to have a better time doing it as well.
100%.
Well, thank you so much, mate. If anybody's looking for your socials or where to find you, potentially coaching, or to go and follow you on Instagram to see more of your stuff, where would they go?
So Callum_precision coaching on Instagram, and YouTube, just Callum Abbott, and you can see different kind of content on there regarding coaching, tips on there as well, and also kind of insights to behind the scenes with things as well.
Yeah, amazing. And I will be linking the YouTube and Instagram in the description as well for those who are listening. Thank you so much for everyone who has listened on YouTube or Spotify. If you can follow, subscribe, all that lovely stuff, it would mean the world. And we've got more good guests coming on in the future. And I hope you enjoyed this episode.